Sex and relationships are a beautiful way to actually heal trauma too, but many people still experience a lot of sexual shame, and that's connected to body image issues and internalized ideas around sex. Ventral state is about connection and play and engagement. And when it comes to sex, it belongs to the ventral capacity. The sex has to be within the containment of the safe relationship. In that way, it can be very healing.
Hey, team. Welcome back to another episode of The Wellness Effect. And today we are joined by a super special guest. Her name is Ivana. She is a sex and relationship therapist who does somatic nervous system work. And we are unpacking why libido issues are almost never just about sex, and also the difference between spontaneous versus responsive desire and the small shifts that rebuild safety and connection when you feel disconnected but don't know why. So we just finished this conversation and we are so excited for you guys to listen. Let's get into it.
Today, it's just Lacey and I hosting. Kira isn't here, but we have a very special guest. We're joined by Ivana, a therapist from Kat Kova Therapy. We don't often take guests on, and we're very particular with who we do take on. But when Kat Kova Therapy reached out to us, we thought it would be a really, really great fit. And we also thought that our viewers and listeners would get a lot from the podcast and the conversation. So we're really excited to dive into everything today and just have a good chat. So, hello, Ivana. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi. Hi, you too. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. I was mentioning earlier how lovely it is as a therapist to kind of leave the therapy room because, many people don't go to therapy or don't have access to therapy and things like that. So, kind of to have the opportunity to share the knowledge is always like pleasure for me. So, thank you for having me.
No, we're so excited. I was thinking about that this morning, how it is not very accessible, and you don't often get the opportunity to talk one on one with a therapist in like a non therapy
Yeah.
conversation. So, I was a little bit nervous that you might be psychoanalyzing us today, but but it'll be good.
Well, you can use like also you can use me a little bit. Like if you have any particular questions that you would want to ask a therapist, like you can use me as a therapist too.
Yeah.
Which is good.
A live therapy session for me and
Yes.
Jensen. We're
Ah,
excited.
yeah, we
No, I love
are.
that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the type of therapy that you do? Because that is a big reason why you're here, also. I love it.
Yes. So I am registered psychotherapist here in Ontario. I am part of Kat Kova Therapy practice. So we do specialize as a group practice in sex therapy and relationship therapy. I am also somatic experiencing practitioner. So I uh, do a lot like nervous system work. So like trauma work, nervous system work, like bottom up approach to therapy. That's what I specialize in. I have a lot of training in sex therapy, different approaches to therapy, but I do work with a lot of like couples and individuals struggling with sex and relationships.
Wow,
Yeah.
I
that
love that.
is perfect for us because we talk so much about nervous system. And a couple episodes ago, well, it would have been a while ago, we were talking about like, what does somatic therapy really entail? Because somatic is just like body, right?
It is body in terms of psychotherapy. Yeah, it means like working with biology, like nervous system. So if you think about like more cognitive or behavioral approaches to therapy, they target like our thinking, our beliefs, the meaning that we make. With more kind of like somatic oriented therapies, we are working with the nervous system and the activation in the nervous system. So it's not about us talking about what happened, but it's more like how that impacted your physiology, your nervous system, how that still lives inside your body. Does it make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that's such a good way to describe it, and it's cool that you do
Yeah.
both of those things and combine them.
Yeah, I do think that both are needed, especially when we talk about trauma or something more complex. And I do believe that all therapists are so needed. We sometimes need a little bit of meaning making and to challenge our, um, perceptions or core beliefs and things like that. Sometimes we do need to go kind of deeper, and
Right.
see where the pain is and to kind of release that. I do always laugh to myself, even when I do consults with new clients. Like somatic is a little bit like fancy word. Like
Mhm.
when you hear the kind of somatic therapy, what is it? It's really like recovering the wisdom of the body, and kind of tuning into what we already know and feel and sense. So it's not very complicated. It's actually very simple, but if we are really stuck here, it can take a little bit of time to kind of come down and come back to the body.
Mhm.
Do you think that it's good for someone to start with talk therapy and then go into somatic, or vice versa, or both needed equally, maybe at the same time?
This episode of The Wellness Effect is brought to you by Lifestyle You. If you're listening to this podcast and thinking, okay, this sounds like me, whether it's low energy, hormone imbalances, stubborn symptoms, or you just feel like you've tried everything, Lifestyle You is our root cause coaching program designed to help you actually connect the dots.
We use functional nutrition, personalized support, and functional lab testing to figure out why your body is doing what it's doing, instead of just guessing or slapping a band aid on symptoms.
And because you're a listener of the Wellness Effect, when you use the code Wellness Effect, you'll receive a free functional lab when you join the program. If this episode is resonating with you, make sure to share it with a friend, subscribe to the podcast, and check out the show notes to learn more about Lifestyle You and how to apply.
It really depends where you are on your journey. I think like if something big happened, or you had very painful childhood, or things that were overwhelming repeatedly, it's good to start maybe with talk therapy. We talk a lot about that initial phase of therapy when we work on stabilizing, right? And we need a little bit of that prefrontal cortex, really,
Yeah.
through talking and mirroring and building the relationship to kind of like build that base. And then people can go into more kind of somatic work and work with the body and like deeper issues. Some people love somatic work right away because they are kind of more connected to their bodies. It just depends. Like, I don't think that there's kind of like a right or wrong way. It's just like a preference. And that's really a beauty of therapy. There's so many modalities because we are all different, and like
Mhm.
different keys open different doors, so you don't want to judge yourself. There's no kind of like hierarchy in terms of approaches.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I found for me, like, I think starting with the talk therapy was really helpful just to make me, like,
Yes.
more aware and recognize the patterns and
Yes.
get to that next state, and then it was like, "Okay, I can't talk about this anymore. I need to do some somatic." So, no, that's awesome. Well, the main reason we have you here today is to talk about sex. So we're just
Good.
gonna dive on in because 'cause I'm excited to talk about this topic, but I'm interested to just hear a little bit of your story, like what kind of made you go in that direction of specializing in sex therapy over the other ones? Do you have any, like, story that kind of made you result there?
I do feel that as trauma therapists, we talk a lot about pain and suffering and trauma and kind of heavy stuff. And I think that like sex and relationships are a beautiful way to actually heal trauma too.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that was my kind of way to access sex therapy and that entire field because I don't think that there is a lot of conversation about joy and pleasure when it comes to like trauma healing. So, that was kind of my my trajectory, I guess.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. My other one of the questions I did have thinking about this before we got into it is like, what is one of the more common themes that you see when couples come in for both couples or I guess relationship therapy as well as just like sex therapy in general?
I do work with many people. And as I said, many people, I mean, we're all different. So I can tell you a little bit about what the themes are. When it comes to sex therapy, like many people struggle with low desire, for
Mhm.
example. They come to therapy and they're like, I've been with my partner for 10, 15 years and I feel sexually disconnected. Like, what do I do? What is
Yeah.
wrong with me? Is there something wrong with me? That's the first question. Is there something wrong with the relationship? What do I do? Many people experience a lot of, unfortunately, still in this day and age when we have kind of like a, um, almost like hyper production of objectification, and like there is a lot of sexualization of everything, but many people
Mhm.
still experience a lot of like sexual shame, and that's connected to like body image issues, right? And like internalized ideas around sex. Sometimes it's simple as like lack of like good sex education, things like that. But for people, sometimes it's just important to know that there is a space where they can openly talk about these things, where they don't have to feel shy about it, where they can kind of
Mhm.
name these things that they don't necessarily talk about with their friends or partner or things like that. Many people struggle with when it comes to relationships, though. Yeah, there's so many. There is, for example, a desire discrepancy that couples specifically come in to work on. Like one partner has stronger desire, the other one has like a lower. So
Mhm.
then there is a lot of negotiation. So I mean, now I'm thinking I really work with a lot of people. So, like, there's so many things that people want to address, and that's beautiful. Like, that people want to talk about that. People sometimes experience pain connected to sex. People sometimes want to explore different kinks and sexual preferences. Sometimes they are questioning their sexual identity, right? So that changes over time. So it's not just about sex and sexual desire, but it's also about like sexual identity.
And I think that's interesting too because a lot of people come to you, like you said, they don't have desire, they, like, feel like they have low libido, they don't know what they like, they don't know what their partner likes. What do you find there's any commonalities into, like, what the root of the problem is versus just, like, sex itself?
Yeah. So sex itself is rarely the issue. There's so many things that can be at play. I mean, that's why I love therapy, because you sit with one particular person and then you untangle their history. You talk about history, you talk about the relationship, you talk about physical health, you talk about mental health history. So, with every individual, we are kind of trying to see what contributes to a particular sex related challenge that they're experiencing. So I wouldn't say there's kind of like a common thing. What I can say is that many people kind of go into that like, what's wrong with me? That's something that I hear all the time when they are struggling with something related to sex. And that kind of shame and self blame then inhibits curiosity, really. So, like, we have to always work with that first layer of shame and kind of engaging with that person. I mean, we try to engage them in really like thinking creatively about this and thinking in kind of way that is integrative, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you find like when people come in with like one certain theme, like let's say two people come in that you typically see, is there a certain group of people that you see and when they come in and they're kind of struggling with a certain thing but maybe their communication is good, are you like, okay, we're going to be able to make this work? On the other note, is there sometimes couples that come in and the way that they're describing the problems that they're going through, is there ever a point where you can kind of tell right off the bat, like, this might not be just, like, the right fit? Does that make sense?
Right fit in terms of them being together. Is that what?
Yeah. Yeah, sexually and together.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. Like in terms of compatibility, right?
Yeah.
In couples therapy and relationship therapy, we do believe in relationship growth, right? So that is the kind of like foundational idea that we
Yeah.
operate from. So if you come to me with your partner and you are kind of like, I want to leave this relationship because I think that because we are struggling in sex, the relationship or me being in this relationship and being with this particular partner is a problem. I do usually slow you down to see if there is some kind of pattern. Sometimes we think we can kind of get rid of the pain or the challenge by exiting the relationship or changing the partner, right?
Right.
But that can be in many cases kind of like not necessarily avoidance strategy, but it doesn't fix the thing because then you leave that partner, you're in your next relationship, you encounter the same thing. And that's why we kind of believe in relationship growth, where kind of we work with you to work on the challenges that you have with a particular person that you are with, right? And we believe that people can change, people can grow, relationship change, relationship grow. Sometimes, though, people try too hard. Like I
Mhm.
encountered that too, right? Like they overstay, and it's almost like trying to lock the door that is closed for them, and because they kind of don't want to let it go, there are too many like similar values, or they build family lives together, so it's a lot to give up, right? So they kind of overstay and they become a little bit like, yeah, they suffer a lot. So sometimes it is good to actually let go and start something new again. Individual approach.
Depends.
you know
Yeah.
Yeah. That answer.
Not a one size fits all, obviously, for that one, but I was
Yeah.
watching a show and they were going to couples therapy and it was a reality show, and I'm like, "I wonder if this therapist is just thinking like, 'What are you guys even doing here? Like, just give it up.'"
I say that to people. Like, if they come and you notice that there's not enough love and connection between the two of them, sometimes, like couples therapy, it's just I don't want them to waste their money, and to
Yeah,
try. Like, we want to see what is actually there that links them together, and then we can work on particular issues. And then, if that is the case, the therapy can focus on uncoupling, right? And everything has its purpose. But yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah, break up. I wanna go back to something that you said at the beginning about sex being like a place to heal and like a healing container. Can you expand on that a little bit, or how you see people using sex in their relationship to help heal parts of them or from past trauma?
I think when you have a very good relationship with your partner, when there is a lot of safety, a lot of communication, a lot of trust, sex can be a place where you experiment, right? So when you think about nervous system, sometimes we get stuck in that sympathetic, right? Feeling
yeah,
on, feeling anxious. Sometimes we are more in parasympathetic, like disengaged, a little bit of that depressive state, right? And in the middle, you have ventral, which is the goal, kind of, right? Especially for healing, for feeling joy, for like dealing with stress on a day-to-day basis. So ventral is about ventral state is about connection and play and engagement. And when it comes to sex, it does kind of um, belongs to the ventral capacity. Again, the sex has to be within the containment of the safe relationship, right? When is a lot of security and safety. So I think in that way, it can be very healing. Like people can kind of like bring out different parts of their psyche. They can feel safe sometimes for the first time. They can experience belonging for the first time. They can be held fully and kind of surrender to that for the first time. Like there's so many beautiful ways to work with the body within sexual play that can be healing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that because I don't even know if I read this or listened to podcasts or but a lot of times, like, for people, it's even, like, either a sense of control or being able to, like, let go of control based on what maybe happened to them in the past. If it was a situation where they had 0 control, they can kind of, like, take that power back when they are with their partner in the bedroom, and then also vice versa, like, completely be able to, like, let go and to trust, and so, yeah, I just think that's so interesting and cool if you can create a container like that. Do you have, like, maybe one small shift that couples can make that helps immediately with creating that, like, sexual connection that's
And safety.
good? Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that safety and trust are built over time.
Yeah.
So you don't want to rush. You want to take it slowly. You want to get to know person. So like safe sex belong with somebody like in a relationship with somebody where there is a lot of safety and a lot of trust, right? Sometimes we get disconnected, even in very safe relationships, right? Because of daily stressors, burnout, things like that. Like we can get a little bit disconnected. And if you're asking about how to reconnect within um, already established good, safe relationship, there's so many ways. I do always encourage people to use their relationship as a resource for nervous system regulation. When we talk about nervous system regulation, we always talk about co-regulation. Like regulation does not exist without co-regulation. When you think
Mhm.
about that developmentally, like we learn to regulate by internalizing our parents, you know like we love ourselves in the way our parents loved us, and that creates the capacity for self-regulation, really. So good relationships where we can feel safe, where we can feel seen, where we can feel trusting, where we can feel nurtured, are so important for our self-regulation. So if you feel stressed out, very stressful day, going through something that is a little bit overwhelming, use your relationship to regulate. How we can do that? I mean, there's so many ways. I think in couples therapy, we work a lot with helping couples build that capacity and tools to reconnect. We talk a lot about bits for connection, right? And it just depends on you and your partnership, but you can signal that you want connection through play, through humor, through teasing, through joking, but you have to slow down, right? Like
Mhm.
when you look at your partner, you have to kind of like see them. You have to take that moment and take that little pause so you can kind of leave that like stressed out state and come back into the presence of the connection. I do that constantly with couples. Sometimes people come in to therapy session and there's so much happening, and it's all this like noise and fury. Like they just sit down and they talk, and I just interrupt them, and then I say, okay, look at each other. just for a second. And you can see, like, in the moment, what happens is they're just like, oh, okay, I'm here. So it's kind of like just interrupting that, like, habitual activation that we all can resort to, especially, I mean, in this day and age, when we have so many responsibilities and, like, so many things are on our plates with everything that is going on in the world, like, it's so important to nurture these moments of connection.
Yeah, and just slowing down. We have a
Yes.
lot of parents and, like, moms, I think, that listen to this podcast, and
Hmm.
Kira, who isn't here, I'm sure she would want me to
Yes.
ask something along these lines, but, like, when you have kids, I feel like that adds an extra layer of complexity and difficulty to slow down and just see each other. So how does that change the advice that you give couples when there are kids involved?
Yeah. That's a big transition for a relationship and for individual, right? It's a big transition that impacts the body, the environment, the daily functioning, like everything changes. So, first, people want to be very compassionate with themselves. Like, they have to acknowledge that things have changed. Some people come to therapy, they do know that maybe having a baby have impacted their own sexual drive or the relationship, the dynamic between them and their partner, and they feel a lot of shame, and they're like, I'm not showing up in a way that I want to show up, you know, and it's just about acknowledging that life has expanded. You know, you cannot, some people want to resort to who they were before having a baby, you know, and kind of like having that as ideal that they want to kind of attain again. It's not something that is actually attainable. So it is about coming back into this new reality, and acknowledging that new reality and maybe grieving, like, the losses and the sacrifice that we have to make because we decided to have a child, you know? So
Yeah.
life expands in certain ways, but we also lose some things because with parenting, there's so many responsibilities, right? And to say, no, you can just do everything and you can, be mom and whatever, be perfect in the same way you were 10 years ago, like, it's just not realistic. And we have to sometimes let that version of ourselves go. And that takes a little bit of time and adjustment, you know? So a lot of work is about that. And helping people to come into the new reality and then to see what supports they need because it does take a village, especially with babies and kids. And moms feel, especially sometimes, so alone in
Mhm.
that, depending on how much support they have and can get, then we can work on kind of like targeting what is happening in terms of their sexual desire. Many people think that just because they've been with their partner for, I don't know, 5, 10, 20 years, they will naturally not feel attracted to them anymore. Sometimes it's just the context. Like, our sexual desire is so dependent on the context we are in,
Mhm.
right? If you're holding your baby and baby's crying all night, of course you're not going to feel, like you want to have sex with your partner, So, again, just having that compassion for yourself and acknowledging that it's not you, but this new environment and context can help you then work with creating a context that can create something that we call responsive desire. Many people believe that our sexual desire, and that's kind of like more male dominated view of sexual desire. They believe that sexual desire is spontaneous. right? We just like always want to do it, you know? When it's actually responsive, we have to um be responding always to the cues in the environment. So, with many couples, what we work on is kind of like creating an environment when their sexual desire can emerge. Sometimes that's like going on more dates or creating more time alone if that's possible in any way. But again, these are kind of, it just depends on a couple. I think when they start to actually communicate and slow down and see themselves, then they discover the ways in which they can kind of reignite their desire and reconnect sexually.
Right. And just really slowing down altogether, I feel like it comes back to as well. You
Yeah.
mentioned just the 2 different kinds of couples, like, this more, like, spontaneous versus the I don't know what the other word. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how often would you say, like, those 2 match up in a couple, or is it typically you're mostly gonna see in male-female relationships, the man is the spontaneous, whereas the woman's more responsive, or is it sometimes not that way, if that makes sense?
It is actually a myth that we all kind of like learned from movies and pop culture and things like that. A lot of research, and Kat is doing the research at York particularly about this, has come up about the importance of responsive desire. So when you think about sexual desire, again, because of these images that we all grew up with, we think that the sexual desire is spontaneous, that we can just feel it and feel the need to have sex, that we can feel turned on without any kind of context that we are in and paying attention to the cues within the environment that we are in. Spontaneous desire is there, but it's not something that often sustains the relationship. So when we talk about desire, these days we're paying attention to what we call responsive desire. Like there is, if you expect from yourself after a long day of work, let's say, to just come home and you feel kind of like always ready to desire your partner, you are setting yourself up for a failure. It is very important to acknowledge your emotional internal context, like where you are emotionally in terms of your activation, right? Do you feel burnt out? Do you just had a meeting with boss that was highly stressful? Did you just experience a major loss? Like that's emotional context, but also like what is happening in the environment. These environmental things are sometimes subtle. Like, am I thinking about the dishes, that I have to do? Can I turn that off? Or do I have to clean those dishes? And then I can let go and come back to the relationship. Does that make sense? Like our brain is constantly scanning for environment, what turns us on and what is turned off, you know? So we talk in sex therapy about accelerators and brakes, you know? So if there are too many like things that turn you off, you want to first take care of that, so your accelerators like can take over and you can engage in sex if you feel like it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because it sounds like too like it's always comes back to like your communication with your partner and are you able to communicate, "Hey, I've got 40 bricks and no advancers," or whatever you called that. And so I think even like for people listening, even if it's you can't communicate that, or but even creating different environments, which kind of shows where you're at in your I
In the
can't think of the word.
vocabulary.
You know what I mean? Like, "Oh, maybe if the lights are down when you come home, that means I'm in the mood." Or maybe if I turn this red light on, then that means I'm in the mood. Like different ways to signal to your partner. And I'm speaking more to women, I think, because I'm just assuming that we are more responsive to desire than men in like a very general sense. Is that would you say that's right?
Uh, I don't know the research, but probably, yeah. I think men are also very attuned. It's just like there is that concept of, masculinity, that it's kind of like they have to perform, right? And again, that's another story. But yes, think about the metaphor of accelerator and brakes. Think about like our sexual desire as like car, right? Like sometimes there are environmental things that we have to pay attention to, like unwanted pregnancy or unsafe sex, that function as a brake, right?
Mm,
And sometimes there are things that turn us on, and that kind of happens all the time biologically in our nervous system, right? And those are accelerators, right? There is a cute person or a nice smell and things like that. So when it comes to like nurturing sexual desire, we want to know how our own system works. What turns me on? What is a break? You know?
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it'd probably be good for people to know what turns them on and what's a break, because I feel like that's probably a big part of the problem is even what you said, like growing up, movies, porn, pop
Yeah.
culture, it's kind of like and then people get stuck, I think, in that doing the same thing over and over again. You kind of know what buttons to press, blah, blah, blah. And so is that something that you kinda help couples do is come up with even like a list? Because I feel like so many people are so shut off from that part of them that they don't even know what they like or what they don't like because they've never practiced asking or saying no or whatever. It's just like the same thing over and over and over again
We
or the
definitely,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
we definitely do that. Like identifying what turns you on, what feels good, and also what creates that shutdown, no response. Like both are equally important. Some people have very sensitive breaks, for example, like everything turns them off, and then they have to not only identify what is good, but also what can interrupt me when I feel good. If my breaks are very sensitive, I have to kind of work on removing them first so I can tune into pleasure and joy and things like that. So it's kind of both, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's also like coming back into the body. I think that especially within this culture, we don't do that often. Many people spend a lot of time in their heads, right? And many people are disconnected from their feelings. I feel anxious. How does that feel in my body? I feel sad. How does that really feel? Like they kind of know it here, but they don't know it here. And to have pleasurable, playful sex, you have to be in your body. So a lot of sex therapy is about recovering that capacity for people to come back and to feel safe and to enjoy themselves without kind of like being stuck here thinking about dishes, boss, do I look good, all these things.
Mhm.
yeah, and I think also something that I find interesting is like understanding those things that we don't think of like with brakes and accelerators. Like I think you mentioned this, but like if you come home and the dishwasher isn't unloaded, like that can be a break that is just like now I'm annoyed, like nothing's gonna happen. And so like acknowledging that and then like Lacey's kind of been saying and you is being able to communicate that and not just expecting that your partner
Oh, yeah.
knows that that's what's going on in your body, right?
Yes, communication is so important. People feel shy to be vulnerable. Like that's a lot of like relationship work with couples. Like communication is about feeling open to be vulnerable and honest about what is happening for you, and also sharing your preferences, your no's, your yeses with your partner. Like that really builds that ventral container that I talked about. And then you can lean into that play and spontaneity in a kind of more joyful way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And like we mentioned, I can't remember if we were recording or not, but we work with women, like helping them get to the root cause of hormone and gut issues. And what we hear a lot is just that, like, they're not confident with how they look and it impacts their libido and their sex life and stuff. And so, do you like how does body image anxiety affect just your presence and anxiety during sex? And do you have any like pointers, even if you're working towards feeling better and looking better, but it's not your current reality? Like, what are some easy, maybe small shifts that people can do to get that back without just waiting until that perfect day where they feel perfect and
Mhm.
beautiful?
Which might not come.
I think we are all beautiful at different stages. And I think that people have to work on that, like
Yeah.
self acceptance, right? And sometimes they're scared if I accept myself fully the way I am right now, I won't feel motivated to like work on myself or to support myself in different ways, right? So they're kind of scared that they will lose motivation to change. But what we know really is like the moment you fully accept yourself for who you are in that particular moment, the change happens organically. And then you kind of reach out for support, but it's not coming from this fear based thinking or feeling inadequate or feeling like ashamed and things like that. Yes, body image is always somehow part of couples work and sex therapy work. Many women unfortunately feels self-conscious. I think we all internalize these unattainable idealized beauty standards, right? And it's so difficult to then, if we feel self conscious, like drop into the body and enjoy yourself the way you are, right? And give yourself permission to enjoy because you think only certain bodies are allowed to enjoy. I do think, yeah, go to therapy. That's my quick like there are things I think number one for me is self-compassion, really.
Mhm,
Like I always tell people, and I sometimes do that in therapy, like look at yourself in the mirror. They hate it always,
Mhm.
like because there's that first wave of like I don't want to look at that, look at this, look at like whatever they name all the imperfections, right? But when you wait a little bit and you stay and you find your way to yourself, then that acceptance emerge. And I also think that it is from that place of self-love and self-acceptance that we can actually then initiate change that is
mhm.
meaningful for us. So get into your body somehow. I
Yeah.
think that that is the most powerful thing that we can do, like getting in touch with our bodies and learning to inhabiting them safely in a way that
Mhm.
doesn't feel overwhelming and activating, because then you will always find joy somewhere there.
Yeah. I also just kind of tackling on to what Lacey said, like we once again work with a lot of women who are dealing with like hormone and gut issues and just trying to take control of their health. And we know obviously there's a huge correlation between our physical health and our mental health, and not just how we look, but our hormonal balance and
Yes.
how much we're exercising. How often do you see that, and is that something you kind of, like, advise people on sometimes, or can you notice those correlations, or how does that show up in your practice?
Yes, as psychotherapists, we always kind of suggest that people have different practitioners on their team, right? Like
Mhm.
I can work with them on like something that is more psychological sometimes, and especially with sex therapy. Like the first thing that we do is suggest that they go to their doctor and like see if there are underlying physiological things that are coming up. And yeah, people like you are so valuable because again, it takes a village. I can
Mhm.
work on certain things, but then again, this person that I'm working with will have to reach out to you and see how they can get support that they need because we are all limited. I do think that many women are not still aware in terms of really like how hormones impact mental health. I think that only in recent years we
Mhm.
started actually talking about that, and there is more awareness, especially about like menopause and perimenopause and things like that. That has been like in the discourse, like a public discourse, only in recent years, right?
Yeah.
But it's so, so important to talk about it, especially because many women have historically been labeled as like too emotional, hysterical. Like they're all these kind of like metaphors and narratives that kind of shame women. And then when they feel overwhelmed, they're kind of like, am I crazy? And then they talk to you and they're like, no, this is what is happening. So it's so important to kind of raise awareness. I'm so glad that that's happening. Yeah. So thank you for doing that work.
Well, like
You're
you said, it
welcome.
takes a village.
Yes.
No, it does, and it's always interesting too to just kinda think because they're so interconnected of what did, like, come first because, yes, hormones impact our desire and our mental health and everything like that, but then our mental health and our ability to process emotions and everything like that, if not done
For sure.
correctly, will manifest into gut issues, so it's almost like everything is connected.
Yes, yes. And with trauma work and trauma therapy, like there is so much more awareness how trauma directly impacts our bodies. And that's why I love like somatic approaches to therapy because it does work with releasing some of that excess energy that is now like impacting everything in our bodies. Somatic therapy helps you release that because that's coming from the past and you don't need that anymore. You don't have to constantly feel overwhelmed or to have these spikes of adrenaline, cortisol, all of that. Like, so yeah, it's good work. It's all interconnected. And I think people more and more are coming to me saying, okay, I've been experiencing, I don't know, chronic inflammation or some kind of like health issue. And I think it's actually the abuse that I went through when I was a child.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm going to heal them, like they are still working with other practitioners and doctors and all of that. It's just like we are now kind of working with this residue emotional impact that is stemming from their childhood, right? And we can kind of let that go. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when change can really start to happen is when you're targeting it from both sides and not
Yes.
just one or the other.
Yes.
Another question just about trauma that I wanted to ask is like when people have that, whether it's just like childhood trauma, sexual trauma, how do you see that showing up in the bedroom? And what do you recommend in terms of like shifting out of that and working through that, whether it is just like therapy or somatic therapy or whatever that might be?
I think the first thing that I want people always to know that there is nothing wrong with them, especially if they know that they've been through something traumatic. we can experience all these symptoms that doesn't make sense, and sometimes we can feel like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? So I always want to kind of like highlight that there is a reason why you are having certain reactions. Something is happening, and we want to kind of explore where that may be coming from. So, a
Mhm.
lot of, again, compassion. I am not for pathologizing people, right? Like, and kind of labeling them. And, everything is now available online. Sometimes people Google their symptoms and they come and they're already have a self diagnosis that created a lot of shame and then they feel stuck. We want to kind of untangle that. I think that particularly when it comes to sex, like if there is trauma in your history, your nervous system constantly feels overwhelmed or shut down. Like that's the impact of trauma. Like we cannot
Yeah.
be in the flow of life, but we resort to these patterns that saved our lives probably when
Yeah.
trauma occurred, right? Some people go into that fight flight, some people go into more kind of like disconnection freeze, but then these strategies that once helped you now become how you react to your environment in the here and now, and these strategies are not helpful anymore, because you're not in danger. So a lot of work is about kind of like releasing or accepting or working through these outdated coping strategies, and kind of helping the body come back into the flow. Sometimes you have to go into fight or flight, right? Sometimes you have to disconnect a little bit or go into that dorsal, but you want to have flexibility. You
Mhm.
want to have choice. So a lot of work is about like recovering that capacity to be present and have choice. So the tips, I think the biggest tip, actually, I have many people and specifically many men who come and they are dating or in a relationship with a survivor, and then they want to help,
Mhm.
but they don't know how to because they don't have the language, or like they don't have information and all of that. I think there has to be a lot of like education and normalizing of these experiences, so survivors do not experience being re-traumatized in these contexts again, like so that new relationships can actually heal, because from what we know from the research, relationships actually heal. You want to I constantly like provide a lot of this knowledge to people who are dating somebody who had sexual trauma in the past, how they can kind of support them go through these waves, because yes, maybe their partner needs a therapist, and that's always good, right? But also, we all can be there and be present in a way that is non pathologizing, that is kind of like supportive, where we can see somebody's humanity, even though they're experiencing all these outdating reactions and emotions. I don't
Right.
know if that answers your question, but
No, it
yes.
did.
Yeah, I think the best thing like is not to shame yourself. That's the first thing. Like, not to think that you're crazy, and that you reach out for support, that you kind of trust your body. Like, even though it doesn't make sense in this context, it probably made sense in your past, right? And you want to kind of just work on releasing that so you can be more present and available.
Yeah, and just not being hard on yourself because it protected you at the time, but now it's no longer serving you and you can
Yes,
let it go.
exactly. Exactly.
I love that. Okay. We're at 55 minutes. Lacey, do you have any other questions you can think of? I have one.
Ask it. Ask it.
Okay, what are your thoughts on open relationships? I feel like that's kind of a hot button topic.
A button. I work with a lot of folks who are in open relationships and polyamorous. I'm gonna give you the answer that I gave you. It depends on your relationship. What I love to say to people is like, if you want to open your relationship because your existing one is not working, then that's not gonna work.
Right.
You know, like if you want to kind of like open it because you're not satisfied in your existing relationship and you're using open relationship to fix your existing relationship, you will have to work on your existing relationship. You
Right.
know, but if you have a solid, strong, good relationship and you want to expand that, there's so many beautiful ways to do that. That are safe, that are good, that are expansive. It can be quite beautiful.
Hmm.
So that's kind of my experience. I work with many people who have been together for like 20, 30 years and have decided, like, in their 50s or late 40s that they want to open up their marriage, or like there are so many versions and
Yeah.
contracts and all of that. Like, I'm just trying to, because we don't have a lot of time, I don't want to go into details because there's so many arrangements, possible arrangements, but it's kind of like it can work. It's just like that sometimes people can use it as a way to fix their relationship. It can be also, it can destabilize the relationship. I've seen that too. Like there's so many possibilities. Again, it depends on the relationship that you are in.
Yeah, and
Is-
both the individuals as
yes,
well.
yes.
That makes a lot of sense.
Is there something specific though that you're curious about?
Well,
No,
Jensen's
I
in an
just
open relationship.
no, I'm not. I'm not. I could never, to be honest. That is not my personality. I would go
And
crazy.
many people are like that. Yeah.
And I can very happily admit that, but I just wonder what the success rate of them is, especially I feel like when it's like you said, they're doing it when they're younger to like fix something, or I feel like a lot of the times just from what I hear and what I see, and this might come across as more like a judgmental standpoint, it's one-sided and the other person is just like agreeing to it because they think that's the right thing to do. So I was just more so curious if you see that and what is the success rate, but
I
I
do.
understand it more with older
Yeah.
couples as
Yeah.
well.
I do see that, and what we are talking about has to be consensual.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Consent, it has to be enthusiastic. Consent is defined as enthusiastic. Yes, it's not, hey, can you give me permission to do this? I am gonna convince you that this is good. You
Right.
have to actually enthusiastically agree. And I have
Yeah.
to be present to your fears, to your worries, to your concerns. I have to hold space for that. And if that is not something where you want to go, and I'm choosing you, I have to grieve this part that wants to do it because I'm choosing you
Mhm.
and I'm
Yeah.
making this commitment. So again, there's so many possibilities, but what you are kind of naming, I think it's judgment. It does happen. We want to give everyone the space to voice their desires and needs and then be negotiate. We cannot always have everything. That's what people have to know. If I want to be with you and you are not comfortable with something, or it's too much of a stretch, and I'm choosing you, I will grieve this part of me, you know
Mhm.
and because I know I love you, and that those are, again, this is a compromise or a sacrifice, however you want to call it, that I make for this relationship. And we negotiate these things all the time. If I want to have health, I have to grieve the fact that I have to wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, like
Yeah.
it's kind of like we can't have everything all the time. Like we
No.
constantly have to choose, and with every choice there is some kind of loss, and it's okay to sometimes let go because you gain this thing that you want and love, you know.
Yeah. No, it's just so interesting to me because I've always been super fascinated by them and interested, and I've read books,
Yeah.
and I think for me, the reason why I'm so curious about it is because I'm more on the, like, anxious attachment, have done a lot of work to heal parts of that, but that still comes up. And so to me, it's like almost it seems like what's unhealed in me to where that would create such a negative, like, nervous system response to
Yeah.
think of, like, my husband being with another partner that it almost, like, makes me curious of, like, well, how are they doing it? Like, what is happening? Like, what's unhealed in me that would never,
Yeah.
like, be okay with that, you know what I mean? So I've just always been so fascinated, but I think when it comes down to it, I'm like, I don't know if I could ever do it, but I've always been super, super curious on that and almost wanting to for, like, the challenge, but that's probably just something about my personality.
No, but that's a beautiful perspective too. Like as I said, many people grow like through these arrangements. Like there's so much expansion that can happen. They work through their jealousy. They work through their scripts around love. You know, do I feel that love is just this person, and that's kind of like that there's no love anywhere else in the universe for me, right? Like there are so many shifts that happen in the mindset, in the body when we work through these things, and people really like kind of like solidify their relationship and like deep and really the intimacy. I am not going to lose you even if you go away. You
Yeah.
know, you still love me even if I go away, like they build more of that security.
Oh, the level of, like, confidence and trust, I'm just like, maybe one day.
Everyone's
Zach's
different
gonna
though, I think. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have that what, Jensen?
no, I don't. I don't have that desire to do that at all.
It's
And
just
like,
like when it becomes like, we always talk about like zone of comfort, and then you don't grow there, right? So you
Mhm.
want a little bit of stretch, but you don't want stretch to be overwhelming. So it re-traumatizes you. So you have to go back into your zone of comfort, right?
mhm,
So like how much of a like a friction and like excitement and novelty you can tolerate. Really,
mhm.
that's
Yeah.
what it's about.
I still get a little anxious when he, like, goes to the bar without me, so maybe I'll work on that first and then open it up. Yeah. Well, we're at the hour mark.
Yeah, that was good timing. Thank you so much for coming on today. That was a really good conversation. And where can everybody find you?
So we are in Toronto. Our website is www.katkovatherapy.com, and you can find us on Instagram, Kat Kova Therapy. Yeah,
Amazing. We have a
Do you
lot of
do
East Coasters, so
We do, and I was gonna ask, do you guys offer virtual sessions?
we do. We do. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming. Everybody that's listening, you know the drill. I won't do the full spiel, but make sure to download, click the bell, all of that fun stuff. Support the pod. And
We'll put
yeah,
all her information in the show notes as well for you
yeah,
guys.
exactly.
Thank
Okay.
you for having me. Thank you.
Of
Yeah, thanks
course.
for joining us. Bye, team. Thanks for tuning in to The Wellness Effect. We're so grateful to be part of your wellness journey. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on Instagram. We'll put all of our handles in the show notes. If you have questions or ideas, slide into our DMs or send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep creating your own wellness effect.